All right, so hello everyone again. Thanks again for joining us. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. What we'll be discussing today is how to build a strong UX portfolio and real experience to get that first UX role. We have invited a few awesome guest speakers who are all seasoned UX professionals by now and have a lot of experience in the field, who will share many of their insights about their own journey and answer your questions. We'll introduce our wonderful guests in just a few minutes. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. What it is basically we help people who know UX basics and want to transition into UX. Our program is a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects that provides a guaranteed way to become highly marketable and land a UX role. Unlike most traditional bootcamps or career programs, we allow our participants to build real experience, strong real client portfolio, crucial software UX skills like UX team collaboration, client and stakeholder management, and presentation, and master the UX job search and interviewing necessary to actually land a UX role. All in a collaborative and fun environment and under the guidance of industry practitioner mentors from top companies. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, right? But just to give you a bit of a background for credibility purposes, the company is headquartered and was started in New York City, and we have run quite a few virtual cohorts and helped around 160 people get hired into UX role. UX roles, we will tell you a bit more about our virtual program and also make a special announcement closer to the end of the event. Of course, that part is completely optional for you. So here are some companies that those grads were hired by. So we've basically seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition. And as you know, I mean, we can add a few of these slides. Probably need to update it by now, but it's you get the point. So one of our key principles is starting with the end in mind, right? So before diving into things and starting to spend lots of time on learning and doing, it is key to understand what exactly is needed to become the candidate that employers will actually want to hire, right? And then how you will actually get there. So first of all, there are three main roadblock areas that prevent people from successfully transitioning into the field and landing their first UX job. First one is lack of solid hard and soft skills, and that they can actually successfully demonstrate on their resume and their portfolio. Second one is lack of strong portfolio case studies and real experience. And third one is weak job search assets and poor search as well as interviewing skills. So let's address these one by one. Here's a high-level framework of what is needed that many people like and find quite useful. So we use a product analogy in this framework, and you will understand why soon. First, you want to have strong hard skills. And by the way, the reason I'm covering this, right, is just to set the stage, and this will help guide our discussion with the guests and with the speakers and ensure it's more effective. So first, you want to have strong hard skills, right? So essentially knowledge and hands-on practice with the key phases of the UX process and ability to produce the deliverables for all those phases. Next area is softer skills, like hands-on. You want to have hands-on practice and experience with the key soft skills in a UX setting that can be included on a resume, portfolio, and demonstrated in interviews, like team collaboration, client management, presentation, communication, that you can actually show on your resume and portfolio. And this can sometimes be even more important than the hard skills and is listed at almost any job description that you look at. The next area is case studies. So you want to have comprehensive, sizable UX projects, right? Unlike in visual design, for example, right? Effective UX case studies, as you know, probably are much longer and more comprehensive. So the focus is on the process, right? On the quality and the process and not on quantity of those. So typically, you need at least like 3 to 5 sizable case studies or so. We recommend having a couple of those with real clients so that you can actually stand out in the job market compared to all the other people entering the field. Next, you want to have real experience, right? And this requirement is also listed in almost any job description, even entry-level ones. And this is usually the most important criteria for many employers, right? So since the topic of today is specifically about case studies and experience, right? So I would love to share some tips related to building real experience and case studies to ensure the real work or projects that you do actually turn into strong and effective UX case studies and valuable work experience, and not just some experience, right? So first, you want to have more unique and not cookie cutter projects, right, included in hundreds of other candidates' portfolios. Next, you want to have engaged and collaborative clients, ideally. And again, I'm describing like the ideal scenario, right, that will give you the best case studies and the best experience possible, right, and make you much more marketable compared to most other candidates entering the field, right? So not all of this is a must, obviously, but I'm just giving you like this like top level standard that if you have all of this, you'll be in a great shape. So essentially, you want to have those engaged and collaborative clients interested in and committed to the project so that you actually have a good experience and strong case studies. You also want to have an opportunity to regularly interact and collaborate with the clients and those key stakeholders, right? Not everyone gets that, but it's important, right? So you get that, you build that client collaboration, stakeholder collaboration, and management experience. Crucial. Next is ideally you want to have a digital project, right? So not just information site, right? Which is still okay, right? But ideally some like a mobile app or a web app or some type of software, essentially, because those projects are typically make stronger case studies that would be more similar to your future jobs or your future role that you'll be applying for. Next is you want to work in a team, right? So because that is absolutely crucial to demonstrate that to employers, right, when you'll be job searching, that you have that UX team collaboration experience. Ideally, you also want to have a mentor, right? So this will help ensure that you actually do not waste time, right, and that you're on track, right? Because if, let's say the client you're working with is new, maybe they don't have a UX background. If you are just starting a UX, right, and you put kind of two and two together, it might not be the best experience, right, because everyone is new. And so having some type of mentor would be very important. Also, you want to plan, structure, and scope the project with the client in advance, right? And basically ensure that you move in the right direction and the project is sizable, but you actually get it done in a couple of months, maybe a little longer, and it does not drag on forever. That's a big risk, as we've seen what happens in a lot of like volunteer projects, pro bono projects, right? It's basically just keeps dragging on forever. Because ultimately your goal is not to keep doing this project, but to actually land the UX role that you want, right? But first you just need to build yourself up. And this will help ensure that you actually gain valuable experience in a timely manner and have strong portfolio case studies. Next, and very important, if you work with real clients, you want to have that implementation intent from them. So ideally how that happens is by having access to the executive team or the key decision makers and ensuring that they really want this done. Right. So it's not like they just want you to, they just tell you like, do whatever on our products. Yeah, we don't care, blah, blah, blah. You want to actually have, them involved, and you want to ensure that they really want to have this implemented. Why? Because if you can get it implemented, right, this will allow to showcase the impact, the results, right, on your case studies, which would make them stronger. Next is you want to showcase. You want to ensure that you can actually showcase those projects, case studies on your portfolio. Sounds simple, but you'd be surprised. We have lots of people asking about NDAs all the time. And by the way, I'm not talking about like when you're hired and you're paid a lot of money, et cetera, right? So that can be a different story. I'm talking about when you're transitioning, trying to build yourself up. Let's say you volunteer or you work for a startup pro bono or something like that. So essentially, you want to ensure in advance that an NDA does not prevent you from showcasing your work in your portfolio. And also, final tip on experience and case studies is you want to have developer involved earlier on. Ideally, it doesn't have to be like all the way from the start, but ideally you want to have some developer collaboration experience, right? And this will also be useful in your resume and interviews. A lot of employers look for that, right? And this will also help ensure you do not design these like pie in the sky type of solutions, right? So essentially, hard skills, soft skills, case studies, and experience, right? So these first few pillars that we just discussed, so your skills and experience essentially, is like a product or a service that you're building and will be offering to employers. Next, you want to create the search assets, as we call them, to showcase your product, right? So that's an effective UX portfolio, right? Where you want to receive plenty of feedback from UX industry professionals and iterate many times, right, to ensure it's much more effective and you get great feedback ultimately. You want to have a strong UX resume and key online presence like LinkedIn, et cetera, with that professional UX experience, and then also iterate quite a few times based on receiving feedback from UX industry practitioners, right? So essentially, you need to package all of your skills and experience effectively and position yourself as a candidate that employers really want to hire, right? So someone they can kind of see can hit the ground running and help them solve some of their problems. The other area is understanding and mastering effective search strategies and the UX-specific interviewing process. So you want to build relationships with many professional contacts in the UX space. Again, ideally, that's why I'm emphasizing building relationships, not just making a bunch of connections that where you've people you've never met, which is a great start too, but you want to ultimately build relationships because that's what true networking is about, right? It's more about relationship building, and it's actually more interesting, right? It's more, at least personally for me, it's like more fun, right? Where you have mutually beneficial relationships. Next, you want to get lots of practice and experience with the UX interviewing process by conducting mock interviews and special exercises, whiteboarding challenges, portfolio presentations. So basically that whole UX hiring process, right? And this will essentially help ensure that, first of all, you start getting interview invites, right? And then second, that you do not waste those opportunities, but you can actually effectively progress to next rounds and get job offers as well, okay? So we refer to job search assets and search itself and interviewing, what we just discussed, as marketing and sales, right? It's all of that product that you built. So just want to wrap up with a couple of key mistakes, right? So one, probably the biggest mistake that we see is just not building a product that is strong enough, right? And then you can market all you want, but it's just not going to be very effective, right? You'll get some rejection anyway, but in this case, you get much more rejection and frustration than is really necessary, which can basically make this transition quite demotivating and then basically compromise this whole transition altogether. The other mistake is not learning the science behind that marketing and sales or job search and interviewing part, right? Not preparing, not practicing enough in that area and treating it just like click and apply a bunch of times and not doing anything, like not mastering that. And if you don't do that, even if you have decent products with good case studies, even real experience and all that stuff, right, you can still get stuck in that phase for months or even years. So basically, it's crucial to address that as well. All right. So just wanted to set the stage and basically give this quick overview. I hope it was quick. I hope it was valuable as well. Let me know in the chat. Let me know what your biggest takeaways are as well. And now let's jump into the most fun part, right? Where it's not just me talking, but we're interviewing these awesome guests and who have a lot of experience in the field and can share a ton of insights with you. So feel free to turn your cameras back on and we'll take it from there.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Wow.
All right. So great to have you guys here. Thanks again for joining us. I'm really excited to have the discussion with you because all of you are highly experienced by now. You've led teams, you've hired, or you've progressed a lot. And I've seen, a lot of you progress, like make huge progress over time, right? So I'm really excited to discuss this topic with you. So let's start with some introductions. Would you like to briefly introduce yourselves to our audience?
Sure, I can start. I'm Rahul Alexander. I'm a UX designer at ADP. It's always designing for people, and if you could see this coffee cup. I work specifically in this payroll space, taxes. I'm a taxman in a building full of taxmen and women, of course. But it's human capital management, so it's how people get paid, how benefits are dealt, and of course talent as well. So it's a total product. And I'm in New York.
Awesome. Thank you, Rahul.
Victoria, do we want to go next? Otherwise...
Sure, I'll go next. I'm also in New York. I'm based in Manhattan, and I see some familiar faces in the audience, so that's wonderful. Let's see, I am an experienced director, and I've just opened an agency. So if anyone is keen to learn more, it's going to be a consultancy, strategy, and UX as well. Please contact me on LinkedIn. You guys should be able to find me. Victoria Honey is my name. I have worked everywhere. I've worked at small startups. I worked at huge corporations such as JPMorgan Chase, MAC Cosmetics, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like I've seen all sorts of teams and sizes in UX, from just one person team to UX that is just everyone is divided out and doing something specific. And I'm really excited to be here. Also, a side note that I actually teach the beginners cohorts. So yeah.
Thank you, Victoria. Awesome.
Hello, everyone again. I'm Francisco. I'm in New York City as well, although I used to live in Brooklyn and I moved to Westchester a few years ago. I worked at JPMorgan Chase, as you can see, employs a lot of people over time. There's about 1,000 designers at JPMorgan Chase. Fun fact. We grew from 300 or so a couple of years ago to about 1,000. I joined only a year ago. Before that, I worked on the product side, on the marketing side, as a creative director, as a product designer, and I'm now a lead product designer on more specialized on the closest thing I can say, design systems and how different teams can leverage the design system to be more efficient and provide better experiences. But I've been a designer of products as well, so happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Francesca. So awesome to have you guys here. So let's jump into the discussion, and just a few quick notes, right? So I'll facilitate the discussion, might have to interrupt occasionally to ensure we are on time and have a chance to answer most of the questions and give the audience a chance to ask plenty of their questions. Also, every guest speaker does not have to answer like every single question, right? You feel free to just pick the ones you feel you might have the most insight on, or you like love the most, etc. Also, again, for folks in the audience, if you have a question, please use the Q&A tab. This way, you can also upvote others' questions, and we make sure that we address the most popular ones that many of you are interested in, right? And ideally, please also let us know like which speaker the question is for. All right. And just a reminder, we'll make a special announcement about the program that we're running closer to the end of the event, optional, obviously. And we'll also share the career transition roadmap summary handouts. So stick around if you'd like to get that. All right. So let's first take kind of like a quick step back. And I know I've covered a few concepts, right? But I want to get to your guys' opinion. Basically, if we take that step back and start with the bigger picture or end in mind, so to speak, right? Essentially to make your job search more effective, right? It makes sense to first find out why employers are really looking, like what employers are looking for in the UX candidates, right? And then make yourself that attractive candidate. So in your opinion, what do you think are the top 3 most important things that define that attractive candidate?
If you want, I can go first, unless somebody else wants to. I know it's supposed to be 3, but I have 4, but I think I can cut 1. Be useful. And at least that turned out to be very important for me when I got my first internship 20 plus years ago. And in that case, I was one of many that come out of a school, advertising school at the time. And everyone else in my class also had an internship at the same place, same agency. It was an American agency in Rome. But I was the only one being hired of like maybe 8 interns. And I can say that the reason was not because I was a genius. They were not looking for a genius at the time. They were looking for somebody that were willing to, roll up their sleeves and be flexible and work, unfortunately, late hours too back then, but also knew software better than the actual senior directors that were there. And that's one advantage you have now is to learn the software and be able to help others and go faster in the work. They'll ask you for ideas too, but be able to provide those hands and inside other ideas and quickly is definitely something useful that you can do for yourself. Now, it's not the only thing you need to learn, and tonight we'll talk about all the other aspects, but it's one of the things that turned out to be useful at the beginning of my career, where it was very hard to distinguish otherwise from other folks. So that's one. I don't have to call them out all, but one is related is be curious, is related to this because the software you learn today might be obsolete next year. And so you just have to be okay with that. Could also some methodologies in UX research that are kind of similar over time, but you might be using different tools to execute that research. So you also need to be curious about that. So that's something that, to me, somebody curious is somebody that I feel like I can assign a problem of some kind, and they will come back to me either with questions or solutions or both. But they're excited about learning something new every day. I'll leave the other ones to other people if you want.
Sure.
I'll double down on being curious. Just that mindset that you're always learning, and bring some measure of humility to your work, and see how you can help others. So also be knowledgeable as well. I think I'm leaning to a lot of my strengths, which happen to be with tinkering, whether it's design system stuff or it's something that you're coding. Realize that you're working within the tech space, and anything that you can do to sort of say that, hey, and you can empathize with the needs of developers, and be able to collaborate, show that collaboration. I think that all seems to give you an edge. It's something that I would look out for.
Am I taking it home? Am I rounding it off?
Of course.
Okay. I'm actually gonna piggyback on what Raul was saying, which is collaboration skills. I'll actually expand it into communication skills. I think it's vital that you're able to communicate your ideas, anything you worked on previously, anything that you're inspired by, any of the processes, any of the frameworks that you are familiar with in the UX field. And I really love what Francesco said. I think for me, the word that keeps coming up is being resourceful. So even if the software that you're using today will be like InVision, I think is a perfect example, right? Like that was the software that we're all using a few years ago, and now it's going to be completely gone. If not, it's already gone. But being resourceful is not just software. It's also being resourceful of being inspired by things around you, being able to ask questions kind of if you're conducting an interview with somebody, and being kind of thoughtful of what the next question will be. So resourceful and being good at communication, I think, are the two that I'll add to the pile for the answer.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so now let's dive more into the actual projects and case studies and portfolio and real experience, right? Because again, today we want to explore that area specifically, real experience and strong case studies, right? So let's start off with this. What types of projects are most effective in one's portfolio? And just to add to that also, and how can you actually tell, maybe based on your experience hiring or applying or going through the process, right? How can you also tell hypothetical projects apart from real ones? That's kind of like the second part of that question.
Bro, you want to go first? Otherwise, I keep talking. I can go on for a long time.
Well, I mean, I often look for detail and ownership, within a case study. I'm always surprised that, if I do have an interview, that when it gets to the point where, you're at that final interview or you're interviewing with different members of the team, people have, dutifully looked through my case study in some detail, and they're able to sort of, call out specific things for me to talk about. And, that it's actually a pleasure to go through that and, unpack what was done. So I would say, put in the detail, if that's your thing. It also depends on maybe what type of job you're applying to, right? So, maybe some companies prefer sort of longer case studies with a lot of sort of artifacts. Other ones, may want more on the surface, graphics and that sort of thing. So I would say pay attention to the case studies and don't be afraid to be yourself in them. Certainly you're going to be called out on, sort of what your part was in that overall process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
You want to be transparent about what you did, no matter if it's something you made up or something you were part of a team. In either case, you want to be transparent. Otherwise, people are going to find out. And honestly, it's visible when it's very obvious when you're looking at portfolios. If something kind of was made up or doesn't make a lot of sense for the seniority you might have, right? And at the end of the day, if you're looking for an entry-level job, you don't have to sell yourself as the mega creative director or director of UX of, for a small project. I'd say that one format that I've seen working for me and more recently, or at least has been working for me, is problem solution impact. So that at the very beginning, you get an idea of what you were trying to solve, potentially the solutions, and then the impact. In your scenario, you might not have really impactful numbers to show. When you get to work for a real company, ideally you have how many people you impacted, how many people signed up, how many people purchase your product, and things like that. But as close as you can get to that, right? And so that's one format that allows you to state everything at the beginning, literally on the cover, if you will, on one first slide, and then if people are interested, can dive in. I wanted to answer something that somebody brought up on the quantity. I'd much rather have 3 case studies like this than a lot more that don't have these qualities, and potentially even less. In some interviews we do on a panel interviews, people have to go through just 1 case study, maybe 2, if they're in depth, right? And to be covered over 20-30 minutes. So you don't have you don't need a million case studies. Better quality, at least that's kind of my suggestion. One thing I would say, if when you get into the details though, then you want to show obviously the problem, maybe more detail, how you investigate it, got insights around that issue, talking to people, running some other tests, surveys, whatever are the things you did, and then expose some of the solutions considered and say pros and cons, and what maybe you would have improved in hindsight. How you tested your users, what kind of feedback you got, and then ideally iterations, because this business is all about not just one idea you put out there and you're done, but it's all about making assumptions and testing them and then receiving feedback and iterating and constantly improving. We say all the time that products are kind of never done, because that's the reality, right? Even if your product doesn't change, the market or technology out there changes, so you need to evolve it anyway. And that, as much as possible, clarity around your role. You don't have to do everything on a team, and if you are doing it, it's fine to say it, but clarity on your role. And yeah, I think I'm trying to be concise. It's very hard for me.
Don't worry, you're getting better. You're getting better, Francesco.
Thank you. It's only 10 years I've been doing it.
Just also, I think that was also a great point. I also wanted to briefly add to that for a second, in terms of the number of case studies, right? Because obviously not all case studies are equal, right? So it's one thing if you worked on something for 2 days, and obviously it's another thing if you worked on something for a year, right? So, and that's basically what influences, right? Whether 1 case study is enough. In some cases, it probably might be, right? Usually, then the magic number is 3, right? But let's say if you have something very comprehensive, but basically, I just don't want to confuse people to think that, oh, you did 3 hackathons for 3 days each, and now you have 3 case studies and you're good to go for a UX job, right? So it's not going to happen, most likely, unless your friend is a CEO of the company, maybe, and you have some, some way of getting there, right? But yeah, so basically the effort and duration is very important as well. Victoria, did you want to add anything?
I'll add that I think the process is quite vital. So, as the 2 gentlemen were saying, I think it's going in depth and actually validating, like, here's the decisions. I think it's interesting, Michael, that you've added us like a secondary question, which is client work versus like an imaginary weekend project or like a hackathon. I'll always encourage everyone to work with clients, because that means you have constraints. That means you have a timeline. and you usually have somebody saying, we need to revise this, make the logo bigger, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, if you're working by yourself, you don't have any of those constraints. So if you are working on a project that is your own and you're putting that in as a case study, I really want to know that you've put in as much effort into it as possible. That is, look into who the competitors are, direct and indirect, what is happening in the industry, what is happening across, not even within their industry, but maybe even outside. What are the inspiration? Did you talk to with just like your two best friends for the user interviews, which is not really, again, you have all the time in the world, right? Your weekends or in the evenings, or did you actually seek out and speak to complete strangers about solving, getting their interviews, getting their feedback, and then you've added that to the case studies? I think it's kind of going above and beyond if you don't have the client projects that really showcases that. Again, it's kind of going back to everything that we were saying previously, right? Which is curiosity, resourcefulness, communication. It's just like you're going above and beyond. And I'm sure that I will say this again for the following questions, but I think in this industry, even going through the chat right now, like I think it's so absolutely hot, right? The UX industry is so tempting, even more now than it was 8 years ago when I took the first beginnings course and I transitioned from web design. So you really need to stand out. You need to go above and beyond more than ever before.
Yeah, those are great points. And also, just to also clarify, it's we had this great discussion with Jared Spool. Some of you may have joined us a couple of weeks ago or so, right, where he kind of explained, I mean, if you want to basically understand the overall state of the markets, of the job markets, where things are heading, the trends, etc., we have that video available, and maybe Mika, you can put it in the chat or something, so you could take a look. Essentially, it was the point I really took away from that, and that I really liked, is looking at the long term, right? Because as you know, right now the job search market is not the best, right? It's still like the profession is amazing and growing, all right, but the job market itself is hard, right, and challenging because, and essentially, just like quickly explain what he mentioned, right? And I think that was a great explanation, is looking at that long term, right? So overall, the field is growing, but there was this basically big spike during the pandemic because a lot of tech companies overhired essentially, right? And they kind of hired in excess. And then when we kind of got back to more normal life, right, then the correction took place, right? So, and that's when all these layoffs happened. The good part is that non-tech companies seem to be doing much better, right? So then they still have tech departments and IT departments within them, right? So that's, and based on, don't quote me on that, but I think based on the research I did, believe it's like about almost 2/3 of tech jobs are outside of tech companies or something like that. So basically important to look at those sectors as well. And it's important to take a step back and look longer term, right? So it's maybe tougher right now, but the overall longer term trend is still growing, and it's growing at about the same trajectory that it was growing before. So I see some questions, like quite a few questions in Q&A already. So just a quick reminder, please upvote them, right? So please review others' questions, not just put yours, review others, upvote. I think you can also comment. You might be able to comment. I think we tweaked that setting on. And this way, again, I have a few more questions for you guys, and then we'll make it more interactive by taking more questions from Q&A. So here's what I also wanted to ask you. If someone, let's say, coming back to this, like real projects, hypothetical projects topic, if someone only has hypothetical student or passion projects in their portfolio, what do you think they should do? Start their job search anyway, or try to build real experience somehow?
Okay, I'll start. Again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is you should be getting as much client, stakeholder, whoever's making the decision, work as possible. So again, you're going to have constraints, you're going to have timelines, whether you're doing something pro bono. So your uncle has, I don't know, some sort of business, some sort of website, working with him, whether it's volunteering. So again, you're kind of trading the time for a real life project, right? You're working with real life stakeholders. I think that there's a lot of value in that. You're going to be having obstacles, you're going to have challenges, you're going to have to redo things, as Francisco said, over and over again, not just because you need to and just because the users want to, but also because the clients do. Because I think that's one of the things that nobody really talks about. You think that you're going to be redoing something and the product will never be complete because the user testing is coming back a certain way. But also you keep in mind that in the real world, and I know that some of you have a lot of experience, it's also about what the managers, what the departments, whoever you're working on the project with, what they have to say about it. So again, it's kind of gathering the experience in general versus the weekend projects. I hope that made sense.
Thanks, Victoria. It did.
I would also say that find someone else to work with as well. Like you don't have to go at it alone. I think I've had like success early on partnering with other designers, with someone with a marketing background who's interested in user research, and I felt that really worked well. Just chasing like clients freelance or being approached by a client and then being able to build a team around a client's needs and then pitching a project and executing on that. So find others. Right now, I work in an organization where we have a lot of resources, and a large part of it is coordinating the resources to solve certain things, certain complicated problems, taxes and so forth. But yeah, if you can show that within your projects, it's invaluable.
Oh, can I add one more thing to this? So I was a part of this panel on a very similar topic, Michael, I think a year ago, maybe a little bit over. And that was actually one of the things that I think one of us recommended that is like gather. You guys are in the chat. You guys see each other's names, right? You can add each other on LinkedIn. So somebody reached out to me after a panel discussion saying that they've actually gathered a team and they were working on a UX project together. So that is fantastic experience for them. So you guys, please do that. And please then reach out to us and let us know. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, great idea. I wish I thought of that myself. I would like to add, collaboration across the board. Like collaboration with clients. It's not like you against me as a collaboration with a client, but obviously they have decisional power. So you have to learn how to convince them of, that your ideas should be at least tested, and it's not just whatever they're thinking wins. But one other type of role that you should collaborate with is developers, because that will give you an opportunity to see the process end to end, understand what's easy to do, what's complicated, what might take a long time. And you don't want to be the designer who just comes up with an idea and then it's like completely not possible, because at the end of the day, we want to design something and launch it in a reasonable amount of time to test it and iterate. And there's probably a lot of developers out there, they're a little desperate to have better UX because they're building, for them, it's easy to build, but they don't really know how to improve their products. So network in general across the board, and I think it could definitely be beneficial. Awesome. I think the question was also, student passion project, right? Yes, maybe you find a project that the developer already is being paid for, and so it's a real project and you kind of don't get paid a lot to begin with, but at least you have experience on a real project. And maybe you help them manage the project, because sometimes developers don't want to even talk to the client. And so you get that other skill. But managing the whole process is a big part of being a designer.
Yeah, those are great points. And yeah, also just to add to that, we basically, based on our experience, right, and we've seen so many people through this whole transition over the years, basically, right? It's basically finding volunteer opportunities, finding pro bono opportunities, right? And basically, you can find startups. Again, ideally, if you're basically think back to that, those tips that I gave you guys in the beginning, right? Ideally with a product company, like tech product type of company, if that is what you're looking to do in the future, right? So that will typically make a stronger, more interactive case study where there's actually a lot of UX work, a lot of flows, a lot of interaction, etc. And you can try but I don't know, my point of view on this is I think basically very clear, right? Because it doesn't really, if you have just hypothetical projects, it probably makes more sense to volunteer again or do pro bono or something like that, right? Because otherwise you're basically setting yourself up for a lot of rejection, right? And again, when it was 2021, I would say, when everyone was getting hired right and left, sometimes it was sufficient, right? In this market, you could waste a lot of time just applying and basically frustrating yourself for a year and still not getting anywhere, which you could have used to basically use that time productively and build up that experience, build yourself up in some way, right? By volunteering, pro bono, maybe internship, etc. Right? So basically some tips on that. And we'll go into a bit more detail in terms of how you can actually find those opportunities as well. So let's take a quick question from Q&A. So Carol is asking, how do you show work from a company that does not allow you to leave with the design files? So have you guys had that experience?
I think I know what you're talking about. 100%. Yeah, it's tricky. That is for sure is complicated. I don't have a great idea for that because sometimes it's physically hard to take these things with you, and literally IT makes it impossible to do those. So, and also you sign a contract that you're not going to do so. That's the other tricky part. Now, there's some changes in at least in the non-compete side of things, which is different than NDAs, I think, right? There's some legal changes coming up that might simplify some of this, but it's not great to showcase, proprietary work outside of. Now, some people might tell you that you can just show it, but don't share it, like you do a screen share of it. If you do so, I highly recommend to blur anything that is not key, or especially if it's private information, or, talk as much as possible without any, like I had situations where I had to show a tiny thumbnail, right? Not ideal, but that's how comfortable I felt. It was a stealth project. I didn't want to expose those secrets. So find a balance. It's not ideal to do so, and otherwise, create artifacts that express what you learned and you did without giving away the secret sauce, if it makes sense. I know it's hard, but yeah, you might have to recreate some of the things out of memory without showing the actual artifacts, and maybe speak more to the impact than to the artifact, which as a UX designer, yes, in some cases important, depends on the seniority. As junior designer, it is more important to maybe be able to help out and create artifacts, but tell the best stories you can tell without revealing those secrets. Definitely don't post them in your public portfolio. It's very easy to find them, especially if you have logos or keywords that I put in your descriptions. It's going to be very easy to find.
Thank you, Francesco.
You're welcome.
And also, yeah, just to add to that briefly, because we've had a few events in the past and people are asking us like very frequently about this question and NDAs in general, right? So it's also important, like, did you actually have an NDA, right, that basically prevents you from showcasing the work, or are they just not giving you the files, right? And maybe you can still talk about the work, right? So maybe that is a distinction, because if there is an NDA that prevents you from showcasing the work, then you can't really do it, right? Because otherwise you can get yourself in trouble, right? Unless you talk to the employer and they basically, maybe as Francesco said, blur it out or basically sanitize it, right? Maybe the employer would be okay with that, right? So basically talking to them. If there's no NDA, I think that's that's probably a different question. That's
Yeah.
Do you guys want to add anything? See, Rahul is unmuted, so I know. Do you have any thoughts on the employers not giving you design files?
I mean, I think it really depends. I've shared some things during an interview, but nothing proprietary. So and maybe keep that in mind as you sort of build out artifacts, especially early on. I feel like there are a lot of pieces that weren't necessarily like NDA proof sort of stuff. I wasn't signing NDAs early on, so that gave me a little bit of leeway.
Thank you.
I think that there's a lot of gray area, right? So we're talking about NDAs, so we're talking about employers not allowing you to take design files. Now, I don't know of any employer that will want you to take the design file, right? Because you're essentially getting paid to create them. However, the most legal route that you can actually take is what Michael said, which is take a look into what the NDA says. There may be a time limit on it, how long you cannot show the work publicly. You can also even, again, this is the legal route. So you can also approach the HR department and ask, hey, I am a UX practitioner. And essentially, in this field, you can't really get a job without having a portfolio, without having case studies, right? Like imagine you're invited to an interview, just like, believe me, I've done it, but I can't show anything for it. Like that would be insane, right? No one would get a job at all. So you can approach the HR department and ask them if you can show the design files, at least during an interview, if you are, interviewing elsewhere. You can also go, and this is where it's getting into the gray, maybe not so legal way. You can password protect it on your website. You can also then just maybe showcase it if you're asked to give an interview. You can blur out the names of the companies. You can also recreate some of the assets. So again, what you're able to do and what you should do is really, really dependent on a lot of different factors.
One small thing I would add is if that project finally goes live, that's where, you don't need to steal the files anymore. You have hopefully screenshots because you can access that product. It's not always the case, but hopefully it's something you can actually access. And so at least you can talk about it. Again, the NDA still probably says you cannot reveal the secrets behind how you got there too much, but at least you have an artifact that you can show in your portfolio. Sometimes you have to wait that goes live, but that's kind of a in between.
Awesome. So I see that Laura and Nishan have a couple of great questions. So amazing questions that are kind of higher level, basically about how to stand out and enhance your portfolio, how to stand out in a tough job market and keep up with the trends. I want to come back to these questions in a second. Once we basically get a chance to get a few more detailed questions, right? And then maybe then we can do like a quick recap and then answer your specific questions. So I also want to ask, and by the way, this might be like similar to the previous question, right? But we always get asked, right, by all, the folks transitioning, right? So, and we covered this briefly already, but if you would like to add anything. So the question is basically, how do I break into UX without this professional design experience, right? So if you want to, I know we're touched on this already, but if you want to, would you like to add anything, etc.?
Okay, I'll go first. So again, it kind of depends, right? So my background is a web design. I have a graphic design background, although I've just always designed websites. And then I heard about UX and I took a course, yada, yada, here I am. So it was considerably easier to transition from a web design that is visual only into UX roles, right? If you are working outside of the digital space, outside of the design space, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. However, I think most of the time, especially since the job market is the way it is, I will say the most important thing you can do is network. Reach out for the companies, reach out to the hiring managers, find those companies that you want to work for, find out how big is their team. This is news to me that JPMorgan, although it's not very surprising, they have 1,000 designers. Okay, but how are those teams split up? What do they get to work on? How big is the team at, I don't know, Sephora? Is it 100 UX designers? Is it just 10? You get to network, you get to learn about different companies. I think that's going to be the best way. If you are showcasing yourself to be somebody that is trustworthy, somebody that is really good at communication, right? That's one of the skills that we've highlighted. You're willing to learn, you're willing to kind of step outside of the comfort zone, that would be amazing. So whatever field you're in right now, if it's none of the ones that I've just mentioned, I think networking is the most important thing that you can do. And there's handfuls of articles and books and podcasts and YouTube videos that you can watch to make this as I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but it's going to hopefully let you be more comfortable with stepping out of the comfort zone.
Rahul,
Thank you,
you're
Victoria.
unmuted before me, so go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say add to that, like it feels like a very accessible field in a lot of ways. You know, don't discount your experience if you've been doing something before. I wrote my thesis on the experience economy, thinking about sort of the Barnes and Noble and a Starbucks embedded inside, and really looking at the way spaces worked, how people interacted and paid for the experience of coffee within this, you know, atmosphere of Barnes and Noble. So I come from more of an academic background, and I was able to kind of pivot that into a way of thinking that I think gives me a certain edge in terms of bringing people together and solving problems. I oftentimes look at service, or I create service blueprints or work with others, creating service blueprints to sort of look on a high level of how sort of you know, things happen over time, durationally, over sort of rather complicated events and flows, while at the same time you sort of zoom in, right? And you're working on something very granular with the developer on a very specific feature. And so it's that ability to zoom in and out that I think is quite valuable. And you can get that from, you know, a range of experiences outside of UX. If you bring that sort of mentality, that's something that I have a passion for, at least. So you should use what you have. And also, I mentioned this earlier, I had a little bit of a development background as well. I was never, you know, that talented developer, but I was able to sort of translate that into the work I do, and you know, it serves me today. The AI stuff, there was another question about AI in there. I don't think it's going to take a designer's job away, you know, tomorrow, but I do think it is also a very good collaborator, and it's also a really interesting space that I would explore if I was a UX designer today, looking to break into the field. Just, you know, being able to sort of speak to some of the language of AI and fold that into your sort of thought process. It's really cool to me.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely, there's a million AI products that are out there now. They will be gone. Most of them will be gone in probably less than a year, because not everybody can be successful for how many we have. But learn, they probably all have a free trial. Play with them, even if you don't end up, you know, you can't use them all, but at least you have an idea of what's possible, and you'll be able to leverage them in your work. It will be doing amazing things for you to generate ideas, even just to get feedback on what you're doing, create mocks for things that you don't have access to. Just be clear how you generated those things. One thing I wanted to suggest on the, you know, to me, I want to hire people that are curious and they're passionate. And when you create a project that is ideally is for a real client, but so as close as possible to that, great. But otherwise, leverage your past. By your past, I mean, if you're transitioning, maybe you were working in healthcare, doing something completely different. Don't try to explore projects around that space, because it's something where you actually have domain knowledge and maybe insights, because you already observed some things that were not working in that space. And so then you can go and pitch companies in that space instead of like something completely different. Or you have a passion for music. Okay, do something with that. Like leverage something that makes you already excited about the topic. You'll have to present that once you turn it into a case study over and over and over, because, you know, it takes time to create one. And so you'll have maybe those three better be about things that you like, especially if you're choosing, right? In real life, you'll be given, you know, you'll be hired and maybe work on things that you're not super passionate about. You'll have to become knowledgeable about those things, but at least leverage your past in, you know, coming up with something that it gives you that leg up. And also, if I had to hire somebody, let's say I have a healthcare agency or something like that, I'd much rather hire somebody that already knows some of the terminology that somebody have to completely train from scratch, because they've never, you know, they don't know anything about that. industry.
Thank you, Francesco. Thanks, everyone. And I know even when we talk about experience, the discussion still flows to AI. Sometimes it just keeps flowing there every once in a while because it's like on everyone's mind right now. So just to add to that briefly, I know we're not discussing AI today, but since it's on everyone's mind, obviously, because it's like a huge trend right now, right? I would recommend reading Jacob Nielsen on that. He's written a lot of awesome stuff on UX plus AI. One great suggestion that I remember, or quotes, so to speak, or I don't know, I'll paraphrase it, I guess, is AI will not take your UX job, but a person who knows AI will take your job, right? So basically learn AI, learn the tools, learn how to use them. That's actually also one of the reasons like we started incorporating some of the AI stuff into our program as well to help like give you guys more exposure as well, like while you're going through the process and basically make you more productive. One of the key takeaways from there, and again, this is slightly off topic, but I know it like most people are like care, are excited or concerned about it, right? It's basically the outlook, at least from Jacob Nielsen, for example, is that it's not like job of 10 designers is now going to be done by 8 designers because of AI, right? But more like the same 10 designers or UX folks will stay there, right? And they'll just produce much more output, right? Basically similar with any technological progress, right? Where if you took like economics class or something like that, right? As you know, right? Technology drives progress, more output, higher standard of living, etc. Right? And he's expecting UX to just become much more affordable to many more companies and many more organizations doing that. And one person basically have ability to do much more UX work and basically have much more output. So it's very important to learn those tools, right? And basically start getting more and more exposure. And again, start slowly. Don't try to boil the ocean, right? Because it can be very overwhelming with this explosion of tools right now, right? But just start somewhere. And it's like that first step is totally fine. Also, just to quickly point out, I know Zoom chat can be buggy sometimes in terms of sending messages that you want to send to the chat just to panelists and the host, right? So if you want to actually send a message to the actual chat with everyone else in there, make sure that's little blue drop down has everyone in there. So Cameron has a question. Since I feel like that's another great question as well. Have you seen any extra initiatives that really made a portfolio stand out?
I want to tie that to another question that I think I saw before. It was like, and if somebody should create a custom portfolio or custom, I guess, resume too for different jobs, right? In the beginning, probably you're not going to have a ton of case studies that you can therefore hide and show exactly what you want. At some point in your career, you will be able to make a portfolio is really catered to that specific job. But you can change the order, or you can decide to lead with one that you know might be interesting to them because that's that's their industry. So that's what you can do in the very beginning, right? But you'll have to market those, but you can highlight different things about that project that might be more relevant to the job description. So let's say if they're looking for lost Victor. So yeah, that's kind of some of the things you can do. I'm thinking, sorry, I got distracted for a moment. And what was the other part of the question?
Basically, any initiatives
that
really made the portfolio stand out.
I think working on something that is you have a passion for and is relevant for the company, right? That's one thing that it makes you more relevant than others that are at the same level of experience that you have.
You guys want to add anything, Rahul, Victoria? Anything that's really maybe when you were going through the process, or maybe the hiring process, I mean, interviewing, right? Or maybe when you were hiring someone, something that's any initiatives that really made them stand out.
Something that's memorable to me was one of my colleagues, and this comes from BeginX ages ago. He made a video. It was a mobile app, and it was tied to a service of some sort. And so, as part of it, there was like a little film, and he was actually someone was using the mobile app and then delivering flowers or something. So seeing that extra effort, leaning into someone's filmmaking background to tell that story, really felt like, quite impactful. And I'd like to see more of that, because I feel like, that sort of narrative it takes you out of the screen and it puts you into someone's lives. And so, yeah, I'd like to see more of that. I haven't seen too much in folks' portfolio on that leaning to filmmaking, but telling the story.
Thank you, Rahul. All right.
I want to just answer another one that's tied to the top 3 things you should add in your portfolio, top best qualities of your portfolio, and it's worst 3 qualities of your portfolio. And sloppiness is one of the things that is maybe I could repeat 3 times. The other one is too long. You don't want to have something that's too long because nobody has time to review all of it. Maybe when you then get to present it, you can get into more details because you have more time to present it, but make sure that people can get end to end in a reasonable amount of time, reasonable being less than 10 minutes, maybe even 5. Or at least they can skim through and understand the top level of each step of your journey for that project. Sloppiness because at least I grew up, let's say, as an art director, and so I became really, really good at noticing things, typos everywhere, things that are misaligned. Even if you're not applying for a UI design job, that doesn't mean that you can just present things that are incorrect or have a wrong language on it. You can autocorrect to no end your things and do it. There's tons of tools that do it for you. You don't have to have ChatGPT rewrite it. You can ask questions to ChatGPT if you want to help your writing style, but make sure to not just use what ChatGPT gives you. Otherwise, it's going to be, it will feel weird. At least right now, the tone that comes across is, you can tell a mile away. But you do use it. It might highlight things. Some journalists use ChatGPT to poke holes in their articles. And so they feed the article and then they say, okay, give me a few counterpoints to what I wrote. For you, you can ask for, okay, what are the steps I should use, including a good case study? Some of them we already mentioned here, but maybe more specific to the type of project you're doing. So that could be something worthwhile using. Okay,
Thank
sorry.
you.
I know we are.
No worries, no worries. That was good. So coming back to this, because I really want to take this whole real experience and real case studies point home today, right? Because that's like the crucial part of our discussion, right? And of course, also just to clarify, I mean, of course, I'm biased, right? Because we run a program based on real client projects, etc. But there was a reason that we actually started it, right? Because we saw so many people struggling with this whole transition, right? And basically having this hypothetical stuff and doing the traditional career switch, right? Where you just do a lot of learning and learning and learning. And then what? And then nobody wants to hire you because you don't have any experience, right? So I wanted to really fix that. So that's why I'm kind of like pretty passionate about this whole real experience topic, but which you can build in multiple different ways. So here's what I also wanted to ask you guys. Coming back to real case studies, why do you think it is important to have real client case studies in your portfolio, not just hypothetical student projects? And what's the difference? Like, how would you tell one from the other?
Well, I mean, for me, having real case studies, gave me a lot more confidence during interviews, right? You're able to speak from, true experience, and it really, there's a lot to be worked at as you work on a real life project. So it's always a negotiation. It's never what you think at the beginning when you come up to a project and have your initial throw at it, but at the end it turns out something very different. You measure your impact, and I think that's really good. I think it prepares you for not living in the bubble of design, but living in a world of things that we use. So
Thank you,
that's
Rahul.
what real case studies, I would say, the value of that. Victoria?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Again, it's if you can work with a real life client, so like I know you guys are gathering a group, which I'm so happy about. If you again have an uncle Bob that has some sort of business, if you're doing something pro bono, I think there's just so much value in instead of redesigning, I don't know, Starbucks.com or like the Starbucks app or like Netflix. I think even somebody mentioned it in the chat or even in the Q&A, which is usually these companies have a UX team, right? And you're like trying to solve something and you don't know the restraints, you don't know the reasons why they've done certain things. I think it's best to have real life examples. And I know that Michael, runs BeginX, but I think BeginX, I mean, I've taken the very first BeginX cohort and I thought it was really, really essential. You get to meet with a real life client. You hear the obstacles that you hear like not even the obstacles, but you have like the red tape that you otherwise wouldn't if you're just working on a project by yourself, because like you can do it all and there is no limits to what you can do. I'll be honest, if I see a portfolio that is only passion projects and again they're redesigning Netflix, that like when we're scrolling through and trying to decide on a movie to watch at the end of the evening, and then they're designing something else and something else, like 3 giant companies, I think that's great. And of course it's dependent on how in-depth their case studies are, but I much rather speak with the person that may be really passionate and has worked on a small little startup that I've never even heard of, but has solved and actually spoken with the users. So went above and beyond, but had those obstacles. Because again, going back to the very first question that we've answered, communication and collaboration is so, so vital. You will be working with developers, you'll be working with the stakeholders. You're going to need to not only vocalize the user needs and vocalize what you think is the right thing to do, but you also need to be able to take criticism and pivots that, again, if you're working on a project that is just a passion project, you will likely not have to pivot. So yeah, there's ample amount of benefit of working with a real life client.
Thanks, Victoria. Francesco, want to add anything, or did you already cover it?
No, I think you guys have already touched upon all of it. I think that there's nothing that replaces a real project. I think we could rank them all in terms of what are the best options, and having a real life project is the best. Makes you more rounded as a professional. So I think that's the one you should aim for. If you just the one small tip, if you do end up going the route of redesigning something without being asked to do so, meaning like a big brand or something like that, be very clear that speculative work, be very clear what your assumption was, because and then do testing with users, because otherwise, whatever you come up with, don't just say, oh, I hate this, how they're doing this, right? But try to maybe interview users with the actual app. You can even pretend you are from that company, if not to the extent, don't offer a position at that company, just say that you might be from the company, right? But and then gather real feedback, and then say decide to focus on something that maybe was a big pain point. So you're at least getting as close as possible to what a researcher would do for that company. But you have to be very clear that you did not work for Netflix. And then, if you think you came up with some great insights and maybe good solutions, you could even send it to them. But be very transparent and clear about what your relationship with that client was, because you don't want people to even think for a second that you worked for Netflix and then wasn't true, because it's a turn off. But I agree, 100% real work is better.
You know what I just thought of? I think the benefit with working with a real life client, again, even if it's your Uncle Bob or you're doing something pro bono, is actually, I love and hate them, but creating presentations. So when you're creating your presentations, right, you're articulating your design decisions. And as somebody that's trying to break into the UX field, that is so, so fundamental to everything that we do. We're always trying to defend. This is why we did it. Here's X, Y, and Z, the reasons behind it. And I think it also will make your portfolio in your case study so much stronger. If you're working on a project by yourself and your only stakeholder is you, chances are you're not going to be creating presentations, right? There's no need for that, although you also could. But yeah, I also agree that you should always be putting down in your portfolio, in your case studies, if it's kind of like a passion project or something you've done for a big, large corporation, but you were not even employed there. So there's a big distinction to make.
Awesome. So Laura, I know you asked a question about entry level. How to enhance entry level candidate portfolio to make it stand out. So let us know in the chat if you think we already basically answered, because I've asked a few questions to really like try to emphasize like how to stand out. I think Cameron asked a similar question as well. So let us know in the chat if you have a follow-up question on that as well, and we can come back to this in a second. And I also see that
there was this talk about NDAs and so forth earlier, and it just occurred to me that you can get permission to write about the work that you produce, and I felt like that's valuable, right? Like you write a Medium article, you get your manager's approval and that sort of thing. That might be one way that you can showcase something that you did that's kind of awesome. Design and speaks to that earlier question about like showing real world work. Design can be difficult, right? It's painful when you work on a real project, and so getting to that conclusion and showing that you solved something, you put through the metal is just so important. And so if you can convey that in an article as well, kudos to you.
All right. Thank you, Rahul. Okay, so I know most folks probably have this question, right? And I want to come back to this, right? Since you think this real experience and real projects are so important, I know we started like discussing this briefly, but do you want to, and again, if you look at these job descriptions, right, they always have these 1-2 years of experience, even for entry level roles, right? And I know it doesn't always have to be, it's not always mandatory to have exactly 1-2 years, right? Just to clarify that. But it's important to have some, usually for most cases, because it just makes you much more marketable, basically. What do you think are, besides what we already discussed, some good ways to build up that real experience, right? Besides maybe what I mentioned, you guys want to add anything in terms of options, like internships or maybe some other ways? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I want to answer this, but it might be a little off topic, but it's something I felt I wanted to say from the beginning is like when you're joining a company, applying to a job, I personally think it's best not to apply to a tiny company. A tiny company that does not have a UX department where you would be the sole designer, especially at the very beginning. The reason is because you want to learn from others as much as possible. Yes, you'll have every possible task, but you will not get a lot of feedback. You might get feedback from other random people that don't have experience in the field. So ideally, join a company where there's at least 1 or 2 other designers that are more senior than you. Then over time, you can decide to become a freelancer and do everything yourself. But working at a medium-sized company, you'll have enough on your plate, and you'll have feedback coming from others. Sometimes when you join a company that's too large, you might end up doing something that is too narrow for, you're given, oh, you're going to work on this specific card for X amount of time. And that can get boring. So it depends on, that's one thing I wanted to say. I apologize, Michael. I know that was not the question, but I wanted to say.
Do you want to answer? Do you want to add anything about the actual question in terms of ways of obtaining that experience, or maybe channels, so to speak, like any or that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously joining beginnings is one thing. I was on other, I taught other cohorts in the past, now not for a while, but there's definitely a great place to learn and practice with others that have similar goals to yours, and so you practice also team collaboration. But yeah, like Victoria said many times, find a company that is willing to give you some of the work, and maybe you'll be doing it for free. But in the very beginning, the most valuable thing you can do is to create real work. So yeah, do that. Try to do that in some way.
And just to dig in a little deeper, and I know Victoria, you're unmuted, so that's that's cool. Feel free to jump in. How do you find that company to actually give you some work, right? I know like a lot of people probably thought of that. Okay, I know I want a company, right? But how do I actually get that company? Like where?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a real answer other than, looking from Craigslist to other places. Yes, you might be competing with people that are trying to hire somebody for real, and you might find a lot of cheap people. But, in that case, you're not trying to get paid, you're trying to build experience. So that's one reason why I would do it.
It could be the company you work for currently. Like I've known a lot of designers who they go to the press person, they're like, oh, that's a UX content writer that I can work with. And the press person's like happy to help on whatever project it is. So maybe you can help, forge a little bit of that UX culture within, a job that you already have, and then use that as a stepping stone to go elsewhere.
Thank you, Rahul.
I will add that Michael, you said something interesting. So internships is a bit of interesting topic because at least from my experience, all of the companies that I worked in, they had a limit on who can apply for internships, and it usually college graduates or like junior year college. So chances are it's probably not everyone that is watching me say this right now. So just be mindful of that. But pro bono work is certainly something you can do. I'll say this, and I've said this like at least 5 times already. Network. Not just network with other UX practitioners, but actually network. I know that Jazz raised her hand in the chat. She seems like is some sort of developer. So network with developers. Reach out to the companies that you want to work for, no matter even what size they are. So I'm going to go against what Francesco said earlier. Just find anyone that can vouch for you. I think that good people hire good people. And if you come off as really curious, as really passionate, as really knowledgeable, no matter what your case studies are, if there are 3 passion projects, I'd rather work with somebody that is like a really kind and keen to learn individual rather than somebody that has worked at Google, Apple, and I don't know, Uber, but is an absolute, and I'll use the G-rated word, jerk. Okay, I'd much rather work with somebody that's completely that's very passionate and maybe a little bit wet behind the ears. So networking is maybe one of the best ways to find a role. It could be, as Rahul mentioned, it could be even within the company that you're working in now. Maybe it's your friends. Maybe they're not even in UX, but maybe that you can kind of partner up with them and have some sort of project or something that you can help each other out on.
Thank you, Victoria. Also, just wanted to add to that, right? It's basically, I like this saying, right? Like, is it time for you to learn or is it time for you to earn, right? So basically, when you are building yourself up, it can be useful to think through that framework, right? And essentially, initially, if you're looking to build yourself up, right, you just want to find any opportunity that will give you that experience, right? Doesn't matter if it's pro bono, if it's paid, if it's volunteer, if it's internship, etc., right? If it's good. What's tricky, I think, like you said, Victoria, also about internships, they're not open to everyone usually, right? Especially like folks like transitioning later in their career, for example, right? That they're not always available. I would also try to, if you try to go into like, try to find an internship, try to find a really good one that will actually give you great experience and great case study, right? Because the problem is, the difficulty with internships, right, is that there are a lot of, like, the great ones are usually very competitive, like almost as competitive as jobs. And there are a lot of other ones, right, that basically just have you make copies and, make coffee, etc., right? So that could be not very useful for your actual experience and your portfolio, right? So it may not be a strong case study. So just basically really, if you go through that route, right, so basically talk to them, explore, understand their job description really well, and ensure that it will be useful for you, right? And then you can deliver value for the company. Besides that, sites like Democracy Lab or Catch a Fire, right, have these volunteer opportunities, right, that you can actually find, right? And basically I already see that Aditi started making a whole list of people in the chat here, so that's awesome. I see a list of, because we have many more people in the event, but I guess you made a list of active participants in the chat, more active participants. Awesome. So great work, Aditi. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to, as we suggested, right, just make a team, form a team, meet others, etc. Could be an awesome opportunity. There are other opportunities like finding accelerators, right? Like startup accelerators and basically just reaching out to them. That can be an awesome opportunity to find a product company, like a tech company, right? A tech startup, right? Not just a nonprofit that needs a website, not a small business that is a bakery that, you know, like all the Google certificate folks are doing, for example. It's like 100,000 people with like almost the same project, seems like, right? But doing something unique, right? Or more unique, right? And if you find a real company, if you volunteer for a real company, it's much more likely to be much more unique, right? And you can actually stand out that way, right? So it's a great way to stand out. And it can be just more daunting to basically do on your own. I mean, that's why we offer our program, right? Because it's basically, it's like experience building, but in a systematized setting, right? Where you get mentorship and training and structure, accountability, and basically all those check marks that we went over, right? And basically you can get to that goal much faster, right? But that said, right, there are definitely opportunities to do something similar on your own, right? If you have enough motivation and enough time and basically want to, you know, take initiative, right, and find a team, it's definitely possible. Just basically can take much longer and basically much more effort, right? But it's definitely, and I think it's definitely something that many more people should be doing instead of just having hypothetical projects and then just click and apply, you know, 20,000 times and then being frustrated because no one is responding. Well, it's because you probably, you know, it makes more sense to build yourself up more first, right? So you get less rejection. So what else do we have here in terms of Q&A?
Can I add one more thing, Michael?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
you said something really interesting, essentially approaching like really small companies and working either in, as like the UX person that's like the go-to UX person, or even as a team. And I think there's a lot of learning that could happen there. And I think that's a fantastic idea. However, it could be also really daunting. So Francesco mentioned something, which is instead of applying for the smaller companies, where in that case, you'll be responsible for absolutely everything, apply for the companies where you can learn from different departments and different people that you'll be collaborating with. So if you're going the other path that Michael recommended, then the thing that I will say, get a mentor. There are free mentorship opportunities that you can sign up for. If you guys Google it, I'm sure there's a new one. They're like mushrooms, they're popping up every week. You can, I don't know, maybe reach out to one of us. You can reach out to just anybody. And again, I know that I've said, okay, I've definitely said this at least 6 times now, but you can also network, right? Find somebody that you really, I don't know, admire via LinkedIn, right? We have all of our background listed out. Oh my gosh, you're in the healthcare industry? I really want to work in the healthcare industry. Like, you want to become friendly with them, but then you can ask them to be a mentor. Hey, I'm working on this project. This company is just like seed round. They're just getting off the ground. What do you think is the next path? What do you think I should do next? Is this the right thing? What would you do in my shoes? So having somebody to bounce ideas off could be really helpful. So instead of a place of having a one-on-one meeting with a boss, you can have one-on-one meetings with mentors. I mean, obviously the duration of it and the time and the constraints is going to vary, but I think that's also an interesting path for you all to take. But above all else, I think networking and clients, real client projects is the things that I hope that you guys are taking away. At least that's what I'm recommending over and over again, it seems like.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. And by the way, if you're curious to get a little bit more detail about networking, right, we actually have this whole free training video that maybe Mika, you can post a link to. One of the phases, right, basically specifically about job search, right, talks quite a bit about networking, gives you some tips, etc. So if you want to like learn about that specifically, and then also gives some book recommendations, etc. So Mika, feel free to put the link to that training. It's a long, comprehensive training video. It's like 2 hours, but it basically covers the entire career transition, right, from A to Z, right, and everything you need to do and everything you need to be highly marketable and get a role, basically. Yeah, you can just take a look at that with some great book recommendations too. And I see that Milan asked the question that I knew that you guys have. How do we get clients to work with? So Milan, I hope we just answered that, right? We covered all these different channels and methods. So if not, let us know. Also, here's what I want to say, right? If anyone really has a question that you were hoping to get an answer to, right? Because we'll still have a little bit, like a few minutes. We'll be, going through a few more questions, then a few more questions from the audience, but then wrapping up after that. If at this point, like so far, maybe you were hoping to like get an answer, you have this burning question, and you really hoped to get an answer to it, right? And you think, oh, it wasn't covered. Like I don't feel satisfied yet, right? So put that question in Q&A right now, right? To make sure that we know if there are any of those. Okay, and then we'll come back to that and then take a look at Q&A. Essentially, in terms of that experience building, right? If you do it on your own, here's what you want to avoid, right? What you want to avoid, because I've seen it many times, right? Initially, everyone is excited, everyone forms a team, they maybe even try to get a client, etc. You should essentially want to have some kind of facilitator, right? So some kind of leader and project manager, right? Again, as I said earlier, you want to have a mentor, right? And as Victoria recommended, to make sure you don't waste time, because you know how many times like I've seen, basically the team start to do a project, and then someone leaves, maybe they lose motivation, someone doesn't perform, someone is not committed, maybe the client doesn't know what they want, and you don't know how to scope the project, and they are hard to meet with, or they want to meet frequently enough with you, right? So essentially, I'm just describing the scenario that you want to avoid, right? And essentially that you want to address and solve, right? And kind of prevent those things from happening, right? Or maybe you just start working with that client, right? And you just move so slowly because you're not sure where to start. Client is not sure what you need to do, what they want you to do. You're not sure what you want to do. And essentially, this whole project drags on for like a year, right? With still maybe not even getting to the finish line, right? So, and that's why when I was doing this little talk earlier, I was mentioning that's planning, scoping project in advance to ensure that you move in the right direction right from the get-go, right? And right from the start, right? And basically assigning having roles, having a mentor, having a team, etc. Right? This will help you avoid that, right? Because to progress through all those challenging phases, because you will have challenging phases, because real projects are much more challenging than hypothetical ones, right? So be ready. Don't be just excited. Be excited, but also expect challenges, because if you expect them, you'll be able to actually overcome those, right? And if not, then you might just hit a wall and then just quit, right? So basically expect those. So anything else you guys want to add in terms of, I know we talked mainly about case studies, experience, biggest mistakes that you've seen candidates make, and maybe you yourself made in their portfolios?
I'll definitely say that it's spelling mistakes. It's just looking like it's just been like done last minute, like 4 hours ago. Like it's just looks like it's about to crumble. I think that is the biggest mistake and the biggest kind of like, oh, really? Because again, the way you're showcasing your portfolio, the way you're showcasing your resume, your case studies, it's all a representation of you and how you will be if I were to hire you on the team. And if that is the best, like you're putting your best foot forward and that's your best, unfortunately, I'm going to probably pass on you. So not running through a spell check, and I think most computers now come a days with a spell check. It's not having proper grammar. Now, I'm not a native English speaker. I am ESL for life. So I'll run everything through like spell check and Grammarly forever. So I think it's that. I think it's not paying attention to the details.
Thank you, Victoria. Any other portfolio mistakes? And we'll try to answer quickly and go through our questions and then all the audience questions. We want to answer as many of them as possible and have limited time. So let's do this more like what do you call it? Lightning round of questions. I mean, it doesn't have to be like too lightning, but let's just try to do it faster.
I definitely want to see a portfolio on a mobile device, because you'd be surprised at how many images don't scale well, or how many sites aren't optimized for mobile. So and it's a ready point of access for a lot of recruiters and other folks as well. You can see them in the analytics, and treat your portfolio like it's a project, like it's like you're your own worst client in a way. But really, like, I remember when I first stood up my portfolio, I tied in Hotjar in there, so I stalked the users, and I made changes accordingly based on their drop-offs. And I understood when a hiring manager was looking at my portfolio versus a recruiter, and so I tried to hone my website to better convert users to callbacks and interviews.
Yeah,
not
great.
that you should all go to that level of sort of prudence, but certainly keep that in mind. It's a product.
Yes, absolutely. I love both suggestions, the mobile aspect. It happens all the time. Just a tip, like at companies like JPMorgan Chase, we obviously receive portfolios to review, but most of the times our companies blocks a lot of external websites. So you even just ask, if you send something to a recruiter, ask, hey, can you see it? Most of the times I have to look at it on my phone, because otherwise I cannot access through my work computer. And so being able to see on mobile is really important. Things like, for example, Figma, though, are not blocked by default because everybody nowadays is working with Figma. So that actually goes through. Now, there's pros and cons in creating a portfolio in Figma. One doesn't necessarily scale, so there's negatives of that, or not as well as it could. You could provide 2 links, make a mobile portfolio, and one for desktop, but it is a lot of work. But yeah, it seems like a small thing, but make sure that if you're applying to a company like the one I'm working at, actually they can see your portfolio. And some links are blocked, like Dropbox maybe, and things like that. So check that.
Thank you, Francesca. Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I've can't remember if it was Jared Spool or if we ran so many events recently, but someone else mentioned that as well. Basically, because big companies often have these site blockers, right? And so basically, your stuff might not be visible or go through. So it's important to have like a PDF version of it, etc.
And another technical thing, but if you create your own website and you want to get your domain, please do. You can always use that and redirect to a Figma portfolio or something else if you have to. But make sure it does use HTTPS. Not every hosting provider offers that. Nowadays, like things like Squarespace or Webflow do offer it. And but make sure you do, because otherwise that's alone can be a reason why your site got blocked by some of these. Like some people don't even visit a website that is not HTTPS enabled or safe, if you will. And even if they do, they get a warning that just gives you a bad vibe. So a small thing there.
Thank you, Francesca. And I love that. So Jazz helped me out here in the chat. So rapid fire. Thank you, Jazz. That's what I meant. So we'll be firing rapidly, more rapidly, to make sure we cover as many questions from you guys as possible. All right. So here's what I also wanted to ask you, right? So I know we touched on this a little bit, right? So it's hard. I want to essentially explore this topic from all these different angles, right? So portfolios, experience, case studies, etc. And if you already talked about it, don't worry about it answering. But if you haven't, what do you think are the top 3 things that make a UX portfolio effective in your opinion? Anything else you haven't mentioned yet? So I know you mentioned quite a few things.
I think folks you shouldn't discount the fact that it's design. So use design to sell that first page. And I think I'm drawn to really sort of like punchy graphic design, almost like you imagine like what's above the fold and what first loads up. And there's the portfolios that maybe like show personality, maybe a picture of the person like wearing like Apple Vision headset or something. That always like grabs your attention. So just be careful regarding your homepage and that first load. You want to highlight the work, but you also want to highlight your personality. And yeah, personality matters. whether it's you're overly technical like myself, or if you're the life of the party, like other folks might be. So yeah, so I want to see personality. You look through a lot of portfolios if you're hiring, and you need to get in there and show yourself.
Thank you, Rahul. Francesco, Victoria, any other quick tips on top things that make UX portfolio effective?
I feel like we've covered everything. I don't know. Francesca, do you have one that we haven't
I was
mentioned?
thinking, like I personally, I'm something that has been tinkering with technology all my career. I started actually as computer science engineering. I did not graduate, but then moved into advertising, interactive advertising. And I started with Flash, something that many of you might have never heard of. But it was a cool technology to animate websites and make them rich and interactive. Point being though is you can use your website as a way to showcase your skills, but don't overdo it. At the end of the day, you're trying to showcase the actual work. With that said, what you do with your website, you don't have to make it completely devoid of personality. You can have personality, but not to the point that you cannot read the content anymore. You cannot navigate it. So use the best practices on your website too, and definitely test it like you would treat a website that you do for a client. It's another opportunity to learn and make sure that people gravitate towards the things you want to highlight. Make sure to have a LinkedIn profile that most of the times when you apply for a job, you don't apply just with a portfolio or resume, but also with a LinkedIn profile. That gives you an opportunity to even know if people are checking out your looking at your work. Because sometimes if you just give a website and you don't have the right analytics, you have no idea if they're even looking at your portfolio. So yeah, that is another tip. And yes, feels redundant to have a resume and a LinkedIn profile. The LinkedIn profile is something that kind of needs to work for everybody because you only have one, unless you do in multiple languages. Resume is where you can kind of reorganize things to apply to a specific company. Cover letters give you also an opportunity to modify how you present yourself or highlight the things that are important for that company or for that role. And portfolio, as I said before, like somebody said, I do kind of both research and UI design. Okay, maybe you're good at both or you're interested in doing both. But for example, it's rare that somebody would be hiring for somebody that does all the way from research to UI. Maybe sometimes there's a place where you have to wear all these hats. But if you are applying for a role is only one or the other, for example, divide your portfolio into 2 tabs, so at least, so you can direct people that are interested in the UI side of things to that one, and people are interested in UX side of things to that one. Then they can always check out the rest of the work, but at least they land on something that's relevant to them and not just something that feels too generic, if the role is. I'm answering here a lot of questions I saw also in the chat before. One was a difference between UX and product. I think if you ask different people, you get a lot of different definitions. The smaller the company, the more likely these overlap, and that you'll be doing everything from research to giving feedback to developers on how to, on the quality of what they built. And unfortunately, we have this UX and UI role that it doesn't really exist in larger companies, but it is a reality in small companies, even if it's a lot to ask a person to do all of it. It's good as a designer to experience all of it, but over time you might specialize in one or the other. And then the distinction between UX designers and UX researcher, for example, there's some researchers, they don't design anything. They really just use artifacts that, created by others, and then the usability testing. Maybe they play a prototype that they didn't create, somebody else created, but they are really good at interviewing people and finding insights and things like that. So understand the difference between research, design, UI, all of it. And product, in some cases, can be somebody that touches all of it, but not necessarily the research as a UX research would do it, but enough to understand it. And then sometimes they can be very technical because I think everybody should understand the business side of things. Some definition claim that product design sometimes is more into the weeds of the product, of the product and the business side of things. And usually product design is more related to something functional and not something just presentational, if you will. And some you need UX, good UX and accessibility also for marketing websites. And rarely a product designer is doing also the marketing design. So those are kind of some of the distinctions. But the lines are very blurred, and it depends on who you apply to. Sometimes you see everything in a job description, and then sometimes it's a good sign that you should stay away from the company unless you really want to just go for it.
Thank you, Francesco. So I see that Sayura also asked a pretty popular question. It's a little bit more detailed and technical, right? That's why I wanted to wait a little bit to get to it. Is there a preference regarding mockups and thumbnails and in case studies? I hear mixed things about angled screens, clay mockups, etc. I've also heard that having device mockups makes designs look outdated. Any thoughts?
I think I can speak to that because the first part of my career was more on the art direction side, and so showing the presentation in that sense was something I was very into. I moved then over time more on the product and UX side of things, where it's not that you don't have to create something pleasing, but where I really want to sell the details of what I did and designed, but also the reason why behind it. Totally agree that using a device, things are changing so fast, will make your portfolio obsolete really quickly. If you prepare your designs in a certain way, you can swap those mocks fairly or the device frames fairly easily, but it is more work. And so you can generalize that device with something that is, maybe just an outline of a device. But people that notice design details will notice if that's an outline of a specific phone or another anyway, but it's better than using an actual device. And the angle screens, they're definitely not a UX thing. Like if more on the UI animation kind of side of things, and I stay away from that.
Thank you, Francesco. I knew you would have an answer to that right away. I knew you love this stuff.
Yeah.
Victoria, I think you wanted to say
I
something.
know, but I thought we're going to move on. I'll just quickly say that. So instead of spending time opening Photoshop, waiting 10 minutes for it to load, and then finding the perfect angle screenshot, like finding and then like photoshopping it, no, that's not the right, like instead of wasting all of that time, it looks cool, right? Like someone is holding the phone, someone's using it, whatever, or it's like at an angle. However, the most important thing, don't forget about the case study, is that I want to know, what is that screen? How does it relate, right? If it's at an angle, oftentimes I'm like, I have no idea what that is. I don't know if that's a part of the flow. Maybe that's an old mock-up that you just attached for whatever reason. Just keep in mind, the most important thing is that you're telling a story throughout your case study. You're telling us the process. Here's the beginning, here's the middle, and then here's the solution, and hopefully some sort of measurement, some sort of KPI. That's the most important thing. Don't worry about the Photoshop. Don't worry about, I actually had to Google what clay mockups are because I don't even know what that is. So yeah, if you're asking a question about it, I think just don't even worry about it. Just include, Francesco, what I've done and what I've learned to do it throughout all the agency that I've ever worked with is just having like the iPhone or the mobile device just have like sort of angles. It's almost like a rectangle with just rounded edges. That way, that thing will never go out of fashion until they turn and change the mobile devices that we use, right? So desktop, again, rectangle with just like rounded corners.
Yeah.
Very basic, very easy.
I'd say the only time where you want to have the device, if it really, you need to show it on the device because it makes a big difference for the presentation and what story you're trying to tell. Let's say if you had to design something for a car, then showing somewhat of a dashboard might, at least to set it up, might be necessary. Because some of the design choices you're going to make might look weird if they were to the same design for a website. So in that case, you might need to set it up.
Okay, I'll totally agree with that. I worked on the kiosk at an airport. that without the context doesn't make any sense to anybody. Raul, you mentioned Starbucks at Barnes and Noble. I don't know if they have like kiosks or some sort of like digital way to order the Starbucks coffee. But again, that would make sense. But again, afterwards in the case study, have them all just like laid out. I want to be able to like zoom in and check them out.
So I know we're running out of time, so we'll be wrapping up soon. I do want to take like maybe just a couple more or so, or maybe 3 more or so questions quickly. So I know, and by the way, if I mispronounce anyone's names, obviously it's not intentional, so please forgive me, but let me know. So is it Jardine or Jardin? As I hear some companies hiring interns and letting them build their portfolio and get the experience on the job. So basically, this is coming back to internships. We touched on that, discussed this a little bit. What can I do to find more roles like this? So let me just take this very quickly, and then if you guys want to add anything in addition to what we discussed, just jump in on this, right? So it depends on what like stage you are at, right? And what's your situation, right? So let's say if you're studying for university, right? That's more obvious, right? That's more straightforward, right? Because a lot of companies, they go only to specific universities and their internships are only open to students. If not, then you can use sites like obviously LinkedIn or Indeed, etc., and basically just look for more opportunities like that and try to find such roles there, obviously. And I had another role. Yeah, basically just follow ensure that this internship is actually useful, right? Really discuss it in advance for them, right? Because you don't want to waste 6 months and then end up not having a case study, not having really like valuable experience, right? So basically discussing that in advance. If I were to intern, right, I would do it pro bono, but ensure that I can do the work that I, first of all, enjoy, and second, that it would be valuable for my portfolio, for my case study, for et cetera. And then I have much more say in shaping that project, shaping that work, right? Versus getting paid a little bit, because I mean, an internship's not going to pay much anyway, right? But then completely like not having any say about the project, right? Ideally, you want to have both, of course, right? You want to have a great paid internship, an amazing project, and which is great for your portfolio. Those are not always easy to find, though, right? So basically, I'd recommend doing that. I know this might not have been like very exhaustive, right? But it's, I would just say it's, yeah, just trying these. There are also websites focused specifically just on internships. I don't remember like not specific, like a specific site doesn't come to mind at the moment, but just if you search for those. Anything else you guys want to add briefly about internships and basically how to find more roles like that, especially maybe if someone is not at a like typical situation where lots of internship are available when they're in college, for example. Okay, yeah, I know we already covered this, so let's so Jardine, let me know in the chat if that covered your question. Yeah, hence I think Manaz mentioned a suggestion. Handshake is another website, mostly for internships. Yep. So Kaushani has a bit more detailed and kind of more, let's say, comprehensive question, right? At least like you describe it very comprehensively, which I like, right? So what kind of projects should we ideally pick for our case studies? Should we aim for designing solutions for a larger company that many people are familiar with and therefore would be able to provide great insights about the products? But these companies also have a huge team of designers. So any design solutions we come up with as students would be very granular for something like a case study. For smaller companies, sometimes it's hard to find users who are familiar with the product. This is again for fictional case studies, but basically, what kind of projects should we aim for as beginners? So I know we touched on this, covered this, but I know this has a little bit more specificity to it. So what do you guys think?
I think it's nice to show range. Maybe you want to pick at something that, comes from a specific product and you're solving something rather granular, and it shows that you're thoughtful in terms of, exploring that space in a way that improves on a very specific user's goal. And so yeah, I mean, it can be good, but you also want to show, other projects that, maybe show more of a high level sort of solution as you go through user flows and other things. So I think mix and match, but just be sure to show that the problem is sufficiently investigated as you arrive to the solution.
Thank you, Rahul.
Okay, I will add that. So the last question is interesting. Essentially, what kind of project should we aim for as beginners? I'll say the thing that I've been saying all evening, which is you should aim for anything where you work with the stakeholders, you work with a real life client, versus it doesn't matter, small, big, whatever, passion project. That being said, I also want to, as I was reading through this, I was also thinking, think about the end in mind. So what are the companies that you want to work for? Are they giant corporations where you will be separated into like different sections? Or do you want to work at a smaller company? Is there a certain industry that you're curious? So tailor the projects, tailor what you're working on and how you're building your skills on that. Also, be mindful of, like, do you want to be a researcher? Do you want to be a product designer, which is kind of everything except for research, right? You design things. Or do you really love pushing pixels? Do you just love Figma and you daydream about Figma all day long and how you wish you got paid to work in Figma? Like, then focus on having case studies that are more design specific. So I think even though the question is quite wide, I think that for everyone that's listening in, be mindful of where do you want to end up, what kind of company, what kind of industry. And again, that's why networking is going to come in so handy. You'll find out how the teams actually work behind the scenes. Be mindful of the skills that you have and the skills that you should progress and continue to evolve on. And then I think that's going to provide the answer that you're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you, Victoria. Francesco, any additional tips? I know you've been quiet for a bit.
Yeah, I'm reading and answering a lot of the questions in the Q&A section.
Well, don't get distracted. We want to hear live.
I'm not chatting with people.
To everyone.
I'm answering questions. What I wanted to say is, to me, is a tip that maybe, I spoke to problem solution, impact format. Whatever you decide to do, make sure that whenever you write the problem statement, that you, even though you might have done the whole redesign of the website, especially for somebody that, for a site that maybe nobody knows about, that might be too much. Like it might be too much of a problem that other people want to get into to try to understand. So try to pick something that is digestible for the hiring manager, that they can understand fairly quickly and for which the solutions also make sense. So you might have to tailor that. You don't need to represent necessarily all that you have done. If you work for 2 years at a company, you probably have a lot of different projects. Pick the right ones, the ones that also come across, and then potentially test your portfolio too. Like, if you, Ro was saying, use Hotjar or something like that. If people don't get back to you after, you submit it to 10 companies, nobody gets back to you, maybe it's time to reassess and understand why. And you could try to talk to somebody. You try to understand if are they, after they land on the homepage, do they click on something? If they don't click right away, you don't have to go to solve the secondary pages. You really have to figure out the message you have on your first page. So yeah, I think that could be my last words.
Awesome. Thanks, Francesco. So analysts, just very quickly, I'm going to mention, so we don't have a lot of time left, but basically your question is a little bit more detailed. Should we divide our case study into specific sections, or make it one big section that is more of a story with everything flowing into each other? So I know this talks about the details of how to structure case studies. Here's what I recommend. We have a whole event that we did specifically on how to actually create a portfolio, right? And how to structure it, going over examples, case study, etc. So I would recommend just, Mika, if you could find that link, please, and share it in the chat. Basically, it's called How to Create an Effective Portfolio. And we actually have a video where Danny, I know some of you joined us from UX Support Group, right? Meetup. So actually, Danny goes over that whole topic. So I know this was a great event, so highly recommend it. Last question for you guys, and I have to wrap up and then make this quick announcement and finish up. What do you think are your biggest mistakes or lessons that you actually learned related to portfolios, case studies, and experience? Or if you want to position it differently, what are any final tips related to this topic, right, from portfolio building work experience that you would love to give to our audience? You can pick one or the other.
Okay, can I answer both?
Of course.
Okay, so I think the biggest learning for me was creating a portfolio. So if you look right now, I don't have a website. I don't have any portfolio that is publicly shown. But if you guys are starting out, I think it's very smart too, because that's how you'll catch the eye of hiring managers, recruiters, et cetera, et cetera. So having case studies on your website is different. And this is something that I've learned from what you're actually presenting during the interview. So during the interview, I highly recommend, this is what I do, create a PDF portfolio that is tailor-made. And that goes into the last question that we haven't fully answered, into the role that you're applying for. So are you applying for the role that is UI specific? Then you tailor the case studies that you've done. You kind of remove some of the research, right? Because it's not applicable for the job you're applying for, and highlight the UI. So you have, the lesson again is you have two separate portfolios essentially. One that is the digital one that's front facing, right? Anyone can go to it, bobsmith.com. And then the other one that you're actually interviewing and walking the hiring manager through. The second thing that I'll say is, I know I'm a broken record about networking, but there may be instances where you apply for the 10 roles through the applicant tracking system, and you actually don't even have anyone clicking on it. And the reason for that is because oftentimes, I don't know what the percentage is, but no one is actually looking at your resume. It's just going into the bottomless pit, and no one is actually, the human is not looking into your resume. A human being is also not clicking on your portfolio. So you're not getting clicks either way. So to avoid that, again, I'll say the same thing that I've said like a billion times now, you should be networking. So get to know the people, make some friends. Michael just mentioned Danny. I know Danny because the UX industry, I know we're all kind of like New York based, is really, really small. So it's very important to be really kind, to be really generous, to be really curious, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the two lasting things that I'll leave everyone with.
Thanks, Victoria.
In terms of portfolios, I think don't be afraid in your portfolio to try out different things, and especially the website. You know, as I said, I use analytics in order to hone my conversion rates with recruiters and hiring managers. Pay attention to your portfolio and make changes accordingly. Get input from mentors, get input from your peers. Be sure that it works on mobile. Be sure it's got an HTTPS, and just continually improve it. It is iterative design, and should you be successful, you probably not have to maintain it as often. So I think that's my advice.
Thank you, Rahul. Francesco. No more advice. No more
I think I think I spoke even too much. So all good. I think I shared my advice already on portfolios. Yeah, I mean, pay attention to what you put on the screen. Make sure it's relevant to who you're sending it to. Those are, like if the sloppiness can really turn off people. So make sure you check it. One thing that stood out to me is something that actually my wife brought up. She's an interior designer, something completely unrelated. But it was something about when you submit your portfolio, you are submitting it to somebody that has not a ton of time, because probably evaluating a lot of different things, right? You are maybe, if you're lucky, 5% of their time of that day, if you're lucky, and you instead have all the time in the world to make your portfolio good. So you want to make sure, and she sold it way better this thing. But the point is, it's your product. It represents you. Try to put all the attention you can. Don't, because if that's your best thing you can produce. So, and the people have very little time to evaluate it. It's sad maybe, but it is the reality,
All right. Awesome. So I know we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for staying a bit longer, right, to answer all these questions. Francesca, I also appreciate you typing answers separately in that Q&A tab. Now I know where all these questions disappeared. All right. So last thing, right? So it was, again, awesome to have you guys here. Hope you guys enjoyed the events and got some great insights. As promised, they're going to make the special announcement about the program we're running because people often ask about it. It can be a great opportunity for some of you here. So let me just quickly tell you a little bit about it, right? So basically, it can be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build a very strong real client portfolio and real work experience, but also get the crucial softer skills like team collaboration, client management, presentation, along with the career prep to actually master UX job search and interviewing, so you can actually land the UX role. So who this program is best for? The program is the best fit for ambitious people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background, basically, and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective and efficient ways, and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments. We're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. So basically what BeginX is, it's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into UX. We ran quite a few cohorts by now, helped about 160 people transition into UX. Alumni of the program have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, ABC News, Meta, JPMorgan, many, many more. So the program was ranked by SwitchUp as a best UX program and also featured in Fortune magazine and on the ADP list. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, Amex, The Economist, and many others. So what you gain after completing it is basically you build not just hard skills, but the crucial softer skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and master UX job search and interviewing so you can actually land a job. And in fact, our grads have done so well that we also offer a money-back guarantee. Basically, you either land the UX job and follow the guidelines, or you get your tuition back plus an extra $500 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginx.com. You'll see a link in the chat. The next cohort starts quite soon, actually, May 29th, and it's pretty much almost full. And our cohorts are capped at 12 people max, right? So, and basically fill up very quickly. So if you feel like you may be a good fit, just act there soon. Also, to thank everyone in our community who attended this event, you'll be eligible for a $600 tuition credit if accepted. To claim that credit, what you need to do is just by this Friday, so by tomorrow, go to the website. Again, you'll get the link in the chat and request a free, no commitment career transition consultation, or you can also just apply or request program info. And by the way, just one last point here, right? So our consultations are designed to not just be some like quick program pitch, but provide an opportunity for you to learn about UX career transition best practices, pitfalls to avoid, get some guidance and personalized advice, to ask questions about your own UX career switch and how the program can help, and basically see if you may be a good fit. In addition to, I also wanted to mention that we frequently run different types of virtual events. So we'll keep you guys updated about all these upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every few weeks or so. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you again to our wonderful guest speakers for taking the time to join us and provide all the valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you guys here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Michael. Take care, everyone.
I see you.
Bye.
Bye, good night.
Thank you so much. See lots of hearts. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.